indicators of a war, of an enemy. And so we know from Iraq that the government acts not just out of what it says it's going to do, but for other reasons. So why not apply that logic to what's happening with immigration? Because I think immigration is about controlling immigrant workers, putting fear in them. And I think it's about electoral machinations that we're seeing, especially by the Republicans, and also a lot of Democrats. But it's also about the crisis of legitimacy in the state itself. I think there's a crisis afoot, and when there's a crisis, you want to bring in as many people with guns within. And so there's a lot of companies that are benefiting, like Blackwater, like, does this sound familiar? Halliburton is building immigrant prisons. All these electronic surveillance companies are getting multi-billion-dollar contracts in the case of Boeing to surveil, jail, and harass immigrants. And so, you know, this whole anti-immigrant moment is extremely profitable for the stock portfolios of a lot of companies.
Roberto Lovato, can you talk about the Three Amigos Summit that took place in New Orleans, or as it came to be known, President Bush meeting with the heads of state of Canada and Mexico?
Yeah, there was this is the most recent in a series of meetings that have taken place between the heads of state of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And it's interesting to look at what their agenda is. It's primarily about free trade and security. Okay, and that's not a coincidence. It's not that they just put this together. It's the fact that in order to implement the free trade policies in Mexico that drive migration, that destroy workers' rights and the environment, and that cause, you know, crisis after crisis, and now to do that in the United States and in Canada, you're not just going to need to implement new laws. You're going to have to back up yourself up with military force, as you see in the case of the discussions that were had about Plan Mexico. Plan Mexico is essentially a plan to militarize, or what I would call Colombianize Mexico. I was in Michoacan last year, and it's one of the most militarized parts of Mexico, with a country with no history of a modern history of a militarized society like the rest of Latin America. And so the summits are about fomenting free trade and helping to create excuses for putting, again, more people with guns in our societies, whether it's in Mexico and Michoacan, in the countryside, where they're knocking on people's doors and capturing them and causing more people to migrate, or whether it's in Canada, or now here in the United States, where you see the raids. You look at those images, Amy, that you had of say, MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. If you took away the LAPD names on those, that would look just like Gaza. If you look at the weaponry, the way they're dressed, etc. So these are visual, clear indicators of the fact that immigration is not just about immigrants. It's as much about those of us that are citizens, and instilling fear and normalizing the idea that it's okay to have people with guns and uniforms in times of crisis and meltdown like we have now.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Roberto Lovato, speaking to us from New York. Roberto Lovato writes for New American Media, frequent contributor to The Nation magazine, and our guest here in studio in Los Angeles as we continue on the road, Christopher Scherer, staff attorney for the Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law, and Mike Whitehead, one of the employees at Micro Solutions, who was detained on February 7th during the ICE raid. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we'll be joined